the only way to understand great power rivalry is through the lens of Thucydides. Why is that wrong?
I wouldn't say that it's wrong to so strongly identify international relations, geopolitics with Thucydides' thinking. Thucydides and other writers, John Mearsheimer, realists in general, because that's a nice consistent picture of what they think has happened in history. But of course, with Thucydides, you get more than just, oh, this is what they said. You get a strong view about how nations engage with one another. Thucydides is now so closely identified with some of the research that Graham Allison at Harvard Kennedy School has done on nations going to war, on international conflict. It is so strongly identified that entire circle of ideas has become known as the Thucydides trap, that you have an incumbent great power, you have another rising great power, and then the tendency is for war to break out. So there are historical studies, there's statistical studies, there's analytical reasoning, all going back to Thucydides. But Thucydides was a prolific writer. He said many things. Among other things, he also said is that the strong do what they will, the rest of us suffer what we must. These are two quite distinct ideas, but because they all come from Thucydides, we often conflate them. We think that being sort of hard-nosed, speaking cold truths about the world means that we have to be ready for war. Speaking hard truths about the world means that the weaker nations need to know their place because the great powers do what they will. One of the things that I've tried to do in my work is to say that these are all different ideas, and we should feel free to accept some of them because they are close to truth, and others we need to say, well, let's re-examine the propositions here. So I would say that Thucydides does have a profound influence, not just from his writings over 2,000 years ago, but from later writings among very serious international relations scholars. But having noted that, I think that it is time for us all to take a cold, hard look about what the predictions of that line of reasoning are. So if I may, let me give you one example. Right, this idea about the Thucydides trap is one that says that, well, it's not just a historical regularity. There's a reasoning to it. Right? That reasoning is best articulated by the writings of people like John Mearsheimer. So Mearsheimer says all nations want to advance their self-interests. Critical among those self-interests is the probability of national survival. They must not be conquered by another nation. That's a fine proposition. Everybody can buy into that. Then he follows that up by saying the surest way of ensuring the probability of your survival, if you're number one in the world, is to make sure that number two doesn't catch up. Now, that step is one that actually needs a lot of unpacking. Because if you really want to, and economists, I think many economists would say, I recognize some of what's going on here. So I recognize that a lot of this is extremely rigorous analytical reasoning, backed up by historical evidence, but some of it is not. Right? So what would be why? Well, that every nation seeks to advance their self-interest. All nations do that. Great powers do that. Small states do that. And economists, social scientists, all observers generally would say, good on you, more power to you. That's exactly what you should be doing. You should be taking care of your people. That's the right thing. But then, is it so obvious that the way you improve your own situation best is by trying to keep the other guy down? There's implicit in that a hidden assumption. So I'll give you an example. Suppose that the world is going to hell, right? And the great powers can actually help the world move to a better place. What maximizes the probability of your survival? Is it to be cooperative and move the world to a greener, cooler, safer climate? Or is it to try and do the other guy down? Now, all of a sudden, the same Mearsheimer type assumptions can lead to quite different predictions. And I think for economists, when we look at how international relations crafts this, we say there are things here we recognize. The idea that nations are self-seeking, fine, we're good with that. the idea that nations engage with one another under either a set of rules or the absence of a set of rules, we understand that. Completely clear. But the predictions and the conclusions that you get to, many economists would raise an eyebrow, would say, this is not particularly clear to us that conclusion you've given is inevitable. The example I've just given you is not an unrealistic one. The world now is in a global climate crisis. Right? We know that for the world to move to a better place, one sure way of doing that is to get the great powers to cooperate with one another on green technologies, on improving the carbon emissions in the atmosphere. That's plain, that's clear to everyone, I think. What is the best thing that America should do? Should it be trying to keep China down so that it guarantees its number one? Or should it work with China and help move the world to a safer place? Now, in the Mearsheimer type view, the answer is very clear. Keep China down. That's how you maximize the probability of your survival. In my analysis, and I suspect yours too, Keith, we would say America can actually improve its well-being, raise the probability of the survival of itself and its people by actually being collaborative. That seems to us clear, but that's not really considered as a logical outcome in a realist view of the world. So I suppose that the question you asked is extremely deep and interesting. It says, should we identify geopolitics, the way nations behave towards one another, the way the world is, with only a certain set of ideas in international relations theory? I would say many of those ideas are extremely valuable, but we need to recognize the limits to which they're useful, and we need to unpack their hidden assumptions.